Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at the words of warning found in Joshua chapter 23. Joshua 22, we had that story of the offending altar, where the folks that had gone to the east side of the Jordan had one idea, and it was initially misinterpreted but then explained. Now we're going to see Joshua's final charge. It'll actually take us over 2 chapters, and it will be given in 2 different places. First he's going to speak to the elders, and then he's going to be speaking to the people. Back in chapter 22, it had been sort of people to people. Now it's leaders to leaders, and then next time we'll look at the leader to people. In chapter 22, the takeaway was maybe that we ought to take care not to offend others. We need to explain ourselves sometimes. Here in chapter 23, there's going to be a warning, so be certain to warn others. And finally, next chapter will be to be faithful to challenge others. And we're going to see a challenge, a covenant challenge that's given in the next chapter. Well, chapter 23, verse 1, now it came about after many days when the Lord had given, and notice that word rest, to Israel. There's something special about that. That just like back in Genesis chapter 1, God had created the world in 6 days, and then he had rested on the 7th. Well, they've been taking the land, and now there's a certain rest, but it's not the final rest. There's more rest to come. There's even more spiritual rest to come. In fact, Hebrews chapter 4 makes a big point about that. But God had given a measure of rest to Israel from all their enemies on every side. And now Joshua was old, advanced in years. And so Joshua called for all Israel, for their elders, their heads, their judges, and their officers, and said to them the obvious, I'm old, advanced in years. And this is going to be spoken to the leadership. The old man is speaking to maybe the other old men, the elders and those who are in charge. Verse 3, and he goes on to say, you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is he who has been fighting for you. Yes, you were fighting, but God was really doing the fighting on your behalf. Verse 4, see, he says, I have apportioned to you these nations which remain as an inheritance for your tribes, with all the nations which I have cut off from the Jordan, even to the great sea toward the setting of the sun. The Lord your God, he will thrust them out from before you, and drive them from before you. You say, wait a second, I thought it was finished. I thought this was a rest. Yes, but there's more to be done. And the promise here, he's going to continue to do that, to drive them before you, and you will possess their land, just as the Lord your God promised you. He has been keeping his promises, and he's going to continue keeping his promises. Verse 6, be very firm then. And notice that word firm, that's the same word that we had translated back in chapter 1. Be strong. Of course, we read it there. Be strong and courageous. There's no courageous here. Be very firm, be very strong then, to keep and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses. This isn't strong and courageous, this is strong and faithful. So that you may not turn aside from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you will not associate with these nations, these which remain among you, or mention the name of their gods, or make anyone swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them. You stay strong, and you stay strong in faith. Not just strong in strength, not just strong in courage, you stay strong in faith, in faithfulness to the Lord. Verse 8, but you are to cling to the Lord your God, as you have done to this day. You've been doing it, keep on doing it. Verse 9, for the Lord has driven out great and strong nations from before you, and as for you, no man has stood before you to this day. Your enemies haven't been able to stand up. Verse 10, one of your men puts to flight 1,000. Now, yes, that's a little bit over the top, but that's poetic language. One of your men puts to flight 1,000. For the Lord your God is he who fights for you, just as he promised you. God, he promised, and he's been keeping his promise, so you continue holding to him in faith. Verse 11, so take diligent heed to yourselves to love the Lord your God. For if you ever go back and cling to the rest of these nations, these which remain among you, and intermarry with them so that you associate with them and they with you. In other words, he sent you in to conquer so this wouldn't happen. And if you break that, and if you go and integrate with them, verse 13, know with certainty that the Lord your God will not continue to drive these nations out from before you, but they will be a snare and a trap to you, and a whip on your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good land which the Lord your God has given you. There's a warning here, the consequences of unfaithfulness. And I think it's striking, excuse the pun, but notice what is said. A whip, thorns in your eyes. It reminds me a little bit, I just can't help it, reminds me of what happened to Jesus. As he took our punishment for our unfaithfulness upon himself. He took this curse upon himself, so that he was whipped, thorns on his brow, and much more than that, he went to the cross and died on our behalf because of our unfaithfulness. Verse 14, now behold, today I'm going the way of all the earth. In other words, he says, I'm going to die. It's inevitable. And you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one word of all the good words which the Lord your God spoke concerning you has failed. All has been fulfilled for you. Not one of them has failed. God has been keeping his word. He has done it throughout their lifetimes. He has done it throughout history. He's done it throughout our lifetimes. And that means you can trust him. You can trust him to continue keeping his word.